Shall I pour, or would you like to pour?
I'll trust you to pour more than I trust me to pour.
Why did you trust me?
Oh,
no. Hi BookTube, I'm Sarah.
And I'm Rebecca, and today we are doing the Wonder Woman book tag.
Which was invented by Janelle, who you can find at All the World's a Page.
We will leave a link to the original video down below. Definitely watch it.
Thanks, Janelle.
Thanks, Janelle. We were not tagged in this video, but we don't care.
No one tags us.
No, we're new.
Please tag us.
Please tag us in things. We'll do them.
We'll do any
And we'll dress
tag.
up for the occasion. This is our Wonder Woman look.
Cheers.
Cheers to Wonder Woman.
So the Wonder Woman book tag is all questions inspired by the movie, which is super great. I loved the movie, and it's really cool, and it's about time that we've had a movie like that. You know, we haven't had a movie on that high level. You know, there have been movies like Elektra or Catwoman that have just not been...
How dare you?
I've seen them both. I'll admit it.
Elektra was so good. Elektra wasn't good.
No.
I still kind of like enjoyed it on some level.
Yeah.
Like I remember seeing it in the theater.
Fun. Watching, what's her name? Jennifer Garner. Jennifer Garner do a one-armed pull-up. That was sexy. That's worth watching. Just
I gotta watch this again. I gotta get shit-faced and watch Elektra.
Yeah.
Because that's the way you watch Elektra.
She's just like sweaty and she's fucking jacked and she's doing like these one-armed pull-ups.
You go,
Hit
girl.
me up, Jennifer Garner. Hit me up, boo.
Girl. Boo Radley.
The 2017 film Wonder Woman has been long awaited and received with great acclaim. Name a badass female character who has gone unnoticed for far too long.
So for this one, I decided to pick a character from a book that I think just doesn't get a lot of attention. The book is called Rites of Passage by Joy N. Hensley. Rites of Passage is about a girl named Sam who joins this like prestigious military academy the first time they let girls in. So she's the first girl to join this military academy. I picked her because I can't imagine even doing a military academy at all, like push-ups
Much
and
less
running.
if you're like the only girl.
The only girl, and the first one, and she gets so much hate thrown at her from all the boys there that she doesn't belong there, and she just like deals with all of that abuse as well. And I would fucking snap. I would have killed somebody.
No thanks. So for this, I didn't have a specific book. But one thing I would like to say is I do read a lot of romance novels. It's sort of assumed that because of the implied romance that's going to happen in a romance novel, that that's like the center of those characters' worlds. So I wanted to kind of highlight one of my favorite romance authors, Grace Draven. She's written a handful of books. I think I've read maybe 4 of her books, and I've really loved every single one I've read. They have characters who you believe. They're not just one of those, like, my world is empty, but, you know, now that a man came along.
Now it's full.
Now it's so full, and I'm completely happy now. I think the first book I had read by her is called Master of Crows, and it's still one of my favorites. But I think the one I would recommend as a starter is called Entreat Me, which is a sort of different take on Beauty and the Beast, which you've read as well.
Yeah, she sent that one to me, and I don't read a lot of romance, and it's not erotica, but there's definitely some really good sex scenes.
Yeah, it's some tasty romance.
She does sex scenes very well.
I don't recommend a romance book unless it's like sexy for the right reasons. In general, like her characters, it's so common to see in romance novels like a virgin or someone who's like, I've only had bad sex, or
yes,
I've never
sex once.
Yeah,
it's terrible.
Or like I was raped. Why are they all raped? It's so dark and weird, and people just brush it off. Whatever, but she doesn't do that.
No,
she's like, these are world-wise women who
they're just as sexually experienced as the men that they're with.
And that doesn't fucking mean that a new relationship can't be just as exciting.
You prefer fantasy, right? In your romance?
I prefer genre fiction.
Romance.
Romance.
Genre romance, yeah.
Genre romance for sure. And I just prefer it to be a little sexier, and there's a lot of
a little sexier than Nora Roberts?
Yes. That's how I like my romance. A little sexier than Nora Roberts.
Another shirt for us to wear, a pillow. I like that
We'll
one.
make t-shirts.
We really gotta
I
start
like
making
my
t-shirts.
romance a little sexier than Nora Roberts. Okay, question number 2. The film, Wonder Woman, broke records for movies made by female directors. Name a female writer who overcame adversity to become successful. Most of them?
Most of them.
Probably not as much in, like, modern day. I think that women have a little bit of an easier time.
Depending on where they're trying to get published.
Yes.
Like young adults, very female-dominated writers, romances, trying to get an adult fantasy published as a woman.
It's strange because the majority of readers are still women in most genres, but when you get to, like, science fiction or high fantasy, it's a lot of men. But I do think that, you know, we still see a lot of women using male pseudonyms. An obvious example would be J.K. Rowling, who, in order to get a book published for young audiences with a male main character, you know, used her initials.
Yeah, neutral sounding.
Yeah. Question number 3. Diana and the Amazons get their power from Zeus, the Greek god. Name a work of fiction inspired by religious mythology.
We just read one.
We did?
American Gods.
Oh, yeah. Duh. I mean, that's so, like, over-the-top inspired. That's a very direct example.
Can you think of any others?
I would think an obvious example that comes to mind would be The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Very...
A little more subtle, kind of. More subtle than American Gods.
If you read Lion, Witch, the Wardrobe and think about Jesus, I think that you would not find it subtle.
I didn't notice it as a kid,
That's true.
but neither of us grew up in religious households.
Yes.
I did not see the connections.
I didn't
at
either.
all.
I'm telling you, a reread, thinking about it, it's almost like being punched in the face with it. Question number 4. Name a myth or old story that has inspired countless spin-offs in books and other media. And I would immediately say Jesus and the Resurrection Story. That's all over novels and film. Any type of chosen one story, any kind of resurrection thing.
So Harry Potter is really Jesus.
Harry Potter is Jesus. Question number 5. Diana says, men aren't needed for pleasure. Fair enough. Name a book that features a lesbian romance or female masturbation.
I picked a book that features both.
Ooh.
And it is called Style. It was written by Chelsea M. Cameron. I had heard about it from Cece at Problems of a Book Nerd. She had talked about it, and I actually read it while I was on the trail. So I was in the middle of the woods on the Appalachian Trail.
Reading some sweet lesbian scenes.
Lesbian scenes. It was great. It's definitely it's such a light book, and to be honest, not much drama happens. It's really just about 2 high school girls falling in love, and there's not much of an arc, but like, because lesbians are treated like such garbage in fiction, that it was kind of nice to just see everything work out for them. But there's definitely lesbian sex in it, and there were several masturbation scenes, which I really appreciated because it's not talked about very often.
That kind of representation is definitely not as common. Question number 6. Instead of being the quote-unquote strong female character trope we often see, Diana is a fully rounded character. Name a female character that breaks stereotypes instead of being one. I'd like to start by saying, when I see people talk about the strong female character, I don't know how this originated, but my interpretation has always been of the phrase strong character or strong characterization.
Yes.
And then adding the word female in, which to me means this is a well fleshed out characterization. That does not mean physically strong.
Of course.
And I actually incredibly dislike the common use of the phrase strong female character. However, I do think that it is a trope right now. I would actually like to mention one of my favorite authors, which is a woman called N.K. Jemisin.
Oh, okay.
Have you heard of her?
I have heard of her. You recommended 100,000 Kingdoms to me, and I own it, but I haven't read it yet.
N.K. Jemisin writes characters of color. She writes lesbian characters, gay characters, all in a fantasy setting. She writes so many fantastic representations and these really unique characters. Just really weird and cool, fantastic fantasy.
I think we had similar thoughts about this because I picked a character specifically that is not physically strong.
Yes.
And is kind of sensitive. I decided to pick Cress from the Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer. I love all of the girls in that series. It starts with Cinder, but I definitely feel like Cress is like, she's kind of sensitive and she's kind of small, but she would do anything for her friends, and
yes.
She likes to sing opera in the shower, and she's just like a sweet person, and she develops this giant crush on a boy and then meets him and then doesn't really know how to act, but she's still a badass, but not for kicking, actually.
Not for the stereotypical reasons.
Exactly.
Question number 7. Diana uses violence when necessary, but not out of bloodlust. Name a character who uses their power for the greater good.
For this question, I decided to pick Dani from the book Dreadnought by April Daniels. This book is about a trans girl named Dani, who is kind of minding her own business one day, and a superhero, Dreadnought, falls from the sky and dies. But before he dies, he gives her the source of his power. So Dani then becomes Dreadnought, and it also gives her the body that she's always wanted. So Dani then has to deal with being a superhero with superpowers, having to now come out as trans to her friends and family because she can't hide it anymore, and also dealing with the person who killed Dreadnought in the first place. Dani suddenly just has superpowers, and Dani is a person who obviously has dealt with so much abuse and shit, and her father is awful and transphobic, and she has these powers now and immediately just has the thought to use them for good. I haven't read the sequel yet. I know it did come out recently. I'm super excited about it.
Question number 8. Ares, the god of war, inspires humans to violence, but he cannot force them to act upon it. Name 2 books, one fiction, one nonfiction, that expose the dark underbelly of humanity. For a book of fiction, I think that a lot of classic dystopian novels, I wouldn't choose 1984 I have a lot of feelings about that. Perhaps we'll discuss it some other time. But something like The Handmaid's Tale would be a classic choice of something that exposes some very dark sides of humanity in a fictional setting.
I had thought of Not a Drop to Drink by Mindy McGinnis. It's about a world, I guess, where there's just like this huge, there's not a lot of water. And it is about a girl and her mother who have this little pond by their house, and they just kind of sit on their rooftop with snipers and just like with sniper rifles and just kind of protect their pond, and there's just, but it gets dark fast, and there are very few people in the novel, but the ones who are there are not necessarily great.
But I would more like to talk about nonfiction, because I have a couple nonfiction books. One book that I would really recommend is the book The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. It's about how modern laws and modern prison practices and things of that nature basically serve the same purpose as the Jim Crow laws did after slavery was ended. And there's stuff going on in prisons, there's stuff going on in state funding practices, all of these things that are just setting a lot of minorities up for failure in such intense ways. Like, it's something that I assumed some of these things were happening, and it was spelled out for me in such a way that I can't look away. And my eyes were open to a lot of things, and I would really recommend that. The New Jim Crow.
Yeah, most of the nonfiction I read, I feel like, are comedians' biographies. Which, like, Dad is Fat by Jim Gaffigan's not really showing me the seedy underbelly of America.
Another book I like is called Green is the New Red, which kind of exposes the way that environmental activists are represented as terrorists in modern society in ways you would not believe. And I think that a lot of the stuff discussed in that book leads to the disbelief of, what do you call it? Global warming. Those people are crushed and represented in certain ways. So it uses the phrase, the green is the new red, referring to the Red Scare of communism. And it's dark. It's on my shelf though, can you look?
Yeah. Where's it at?
It's next to the Klingon dictionary. Don't make fun of me. So the book is called Green is the New Red by Will Potter. Oh my god, this is signed. To me! This was a gift! Question number 9. Every war has casualties. Name an author who isn't afraid to kill their characters for the sake of authenticity. I think the obvious answer would be George R.R. Martin.
I actually disagree.
Really? Okay.
I feel like, I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion, I never really read Game of Thrones much. I read the first one.
Okay.
I do like the show. I feel like some of it is shock value.
I do think that the story of Game of Thrones has really kind of thrown off a lot of TV writers. I don't know about book writers. But I don't think it's necessarily just for shock value. In the story itself, I believe that the original purpose was to skew the common representation of that period of time,
and
a particular period of time as it's represented in fantasy. Because a lot of fantasy elevates and romanticizes a very dark, the medieval period of time.
I didn't think about it in the way of history, of people glorifying this fucked up shit that happened in history, and he was trying to tell it more realistically. With dragons.
Yeah. So those were the Wonder Woman book tag questions. Thanks, Janelle. Those were awesome questions. Catch us next time when we talk about something else. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.